Hello, and welcome to the Southcoast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The Southcoast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the Artists Index and sponsored by Heavenly Spirits. And as per usual, we're going to ask our guests to introduce themselves and spell their name, and we'll take it from there.
Hello, my name is Michael Morris Photography, MICHAELTMORRIS PHOTOGRAPHY. Long, but yeah, my name is Michael. I've been doing photography for about the past 7 years now professionally. I do everything from real estate architecture, to family portraits, doing commercial work, doing product work, pretty much anything under the sun. I like to challenge myself. And when, some people say, can you do this? I usually say yes. I just make it happen and I make it work. It's just the whole point of being a photographer. So I try to make myself a niche kind of thing, but I always get taken to another direction and then I end up doing it anyway. So I tried sticking with the real estate and architecture, but now I'm just doing everything. So,
right.
It's kind of big.
Well, it also comes in handy for lean times. I mean, you may not want to do weddings because I know a lot of photographers don't want to do it. Not because it's, some think it's the meaning. Some of them just don't want to deal with the emotions, going on. And there's a lot of pressure because you really have to be ahead of everybody. There's a routine, right, that you got to follow. And then, you try to specialize and then people are like, oh, he only does houses. He doesn't do family portraits. And you're like, yeah, I do. And then if you say, well, I do family portraits, well, you can't do architecture. So you're screwed no matter what.
It's tough.
You need
to make it work.
A unique selling proposition is, Michael T. Morris photography for all needs.
Yeah.
Have camera will travel, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wow. How did you get into it? I mean, is this something you went to school for? Or?
Well, I would say probably my great grandfather, Mal Olivera. He was a pretty well known artist in the area.
Yes, he was. I'm sorry, my
side
jaw
by
just
side
dropped.
with him in his studio, watching him paint, watching him do stuff with his photos, his slide. I mean, I pretty much shouted him as a child, and as I got older, in high school, I just blew through everything. And like by the time I was a junior, I finished all the classes, and I had like plans to go to college and all the other stuff. And stuff just didn't work out. And, years later, I have children and you just kind of pick stuff up again. I picked up a camera, started taking photos of my daughter, and I was back into it. And it just kind of like sucked me right in. So I started with portraits and people saw what I was doing. And then they asked me, hey, can you come over and do this? And I said, well, yeah, I can do it. And then it just took off from there. And so I've always kind of done art. I've always done drawings. I've always done things. It's just kind of funny how something in your life will just take you in a direction. And for me, it was my children. It just like sucked me right down this hole where I was like, I just want to capture everything. Mm-hmm. And it just led me to learn more and discover more and just keep growing and growing and growing. But it all started with my children. So they were pretty good inspiration.
Right. I'm sorry I talked over you, but my jaw dropped. And then, oh my God, Mal Olivera was my first private painting instructor. I still remember him fondly. And I still remember every time there's a horizon line, I think of him. He was phenomenal. He was encouraging. He had the biggest damn thumbs I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, he was it was nice. He was good to me,
Yeah, he was a boat carpenter at Concordia.
Yeah.
And a couple of doors down was my guitar teacher, Lionel Soares, who I was probably the worst student he ever had. But there was a lot of interesting people on Arch Street. But wow, Mal, I mean, you are going to have to come back on the show. Please, please, please. Because we've been trying to do this now since we started this. I want people who have relatives, acquaintances, whatever, in the family, or they have knowledge of these people, experience with these people, photographs, whatever, to resurrect them again, to bring, I mean, I think Mal should be up there, and there's so many other artists. There's Louis, just in the Portuguese community. There's Mal, there's Louis Soares, there's Francisco Raposa. I mean, the list goes on, and wow, I gotta slow down.
Just like him too. They when people ask me about him, and they're like, "Well, what did he paint or what did he do?" I said, "Everything. He did pottery, he did scrimshaw, he did watercolor, or I mean, you name it, he did it." And it's kind of funny because I'm kind of like the same way as he is, but it's just different in photography. But yeah.
And when most people say painting on velvet, they're like, "Ooh, Elvis and matadors." I'm like, "You've never seen a Mal." He used to talk about that, and he said, "But there's just something really, really kind of cool." And he used to do these strawberries, like fruits, these little tiny velvet paintings that I just wondered what ever happened to them. They were absolutely gorgeous.
I actually got a couple of his photos, his stills, and I think there's probably about maybe 70. So there's some really cool ones of him, the old Pay near him. And then obviously he did on a boat, he had it up and then he put it, I mean, just a lot of history,
Right.
all over the place. And a lot of those places are probably gone too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there was a Judson's Cleaners down in the Village. There was a donut shop. I forgot the name of the donut shop, but that was where, if you wanted to know what was going on or what happened, you went there.
Yeah, he had a lot of stories he told me, and some funny ones, and but yeah, I think it really all stems from him as a child. I was just as going over his house as a kid, always just being there, and the guy did everything. He cooked, just the guy did everything. It's just he was a Renaissance man.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal man. I still remember his studio, and his gentleness was another thing. And he told me, a lot of painting is observation. You have to observe. He says, but a lot of it is tricks, and you've got to know these tricks because you can't paint realistically because there's really no such thing. It's an illusion. So he would tell me things like, okay, the edges of your canvas should always be a little out of focus. Blend it very, very gently around the edges because that's how your eye sees. Your eyes don't see rectangles and squares, in perfect focus. And then along the edge of the water. And every time I look at the ocean, I think about him and my stepfather, who was a fisherman. But Mal would be like, okay, when the ocean is angry, it's dark and the sky is light. When the sky is angry and dark, the ocean is light. And those little things, those I still, it's been 50 years. I still remember.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's get back to you then. But please promise you are going to come back. I'll send you a form to fill out with all of his biographical data.
Yep.
Because that would be fantastic. He would be he would be the first person that we've been able to get people to talk about.
Yeah.
So of all the photography that you do, which do you like the most, and which is I don't want to say profitable, but the most you like it.
Yeah.
You like it for two reasons. One, because it's in and out done, or you can like it because that would be all you would do if you were given a choice, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, most profitable is any kind of commercial work in architecture. I mean, weddings are profitable too, but I like architecture. I like homes. I get to go into $1 million homes and multi-million-dollar homes, and I think the biggest home I've been in was 12,000 square feet, and it's just to see. I don't know. I love it. I like to see those things, and I like to see how things are made and joinery and how they just build so I get to go into these amazing places and they're on the water and you get to see these amazing views. So that's just like a plus, because if you enjoy architecture, you enjoy looking at these things, and then you go to the best of the best and it's like, oh man, I didn't even know this place existed. It's beautiful and it's great. And you get to see all these new things, and then you get portraits. And then you get to look at home. I mean, I'm looking through a little viewfinder, you know, and then I get home and I see, I really, sometimes I capture something that just is like, wow, like I capture like the kids and the father hugging, or just like them having a conversation and laughing. And it's like that magic, it's like almost like a high. It's like, bang, you know, I got it. These people are going to love it. I love it, you know? And so it's tough. The architecture, I like to, because I like to go in places and take a look at and actually explore and look how light is. And then we meet with families and do portraits. It's like so personal and candid. That's also like another, like, man, this is going to be forever. You know, this is a good thing.
Right.
And this photo right here, it's the family, you know, you can't bring it back, you know?
No, that's a moment in time that, well, you know, we talked about the database, you know, with the Wedding Museum. Now imagine, you know, you doing a show about Mal and all of the photos and images that you have of his that go in there, and say there's a family photograph of which, you know, you're like sitting on his lap or whatever. That is like, it's timeless.
Yeah.
It is absolutely timeless, you know?
Yeah. So it's there's a lot, you know,
Well,
so it's tough.
I used to art direct a lot of architectural shoots because our clients were like some of the biggest design builders in the area, and people don't realize how difficult it is. Oh, it's a bright sunny day. Why aren't you coming over? Like,
Yeah,
no,
it's a full day.
Yeah. I mean, back in those days, I used to work with a photographer named George Lavoie, who was very, very pedantic. And sometimes we would do 1 or 2 rooms back in those days, after shooting, you know, 15 roids, as they used to call them, Polaroids, getting all the slaves set up. And then, so it's 8 hours for one shot.
Yeah.
You know, and
lighting is very important.
Yeah. And then, you know, the idea of not coming on a sunny day was because you wanted an overcast day where you had more even lighting, you know, especially if it was like the shoot and runs kind of things where it wasn't a studio kind of a setup. So it is difficult, and it's frustrating, and it's frustrating because obviously the clients like, you know, drumming their fingers or tapping their feet. It's like, dude, you know, this is what it takes. You know, you want beautiful pictures, that's it. But the family stuff, I guess it's all over the place. The history of family photography has ranged from the casual to the stiff, you know, informal to the creative and inventive. And you think some of these newer photographs, photographers who are doing these family things that were like, you know, pregnant mommy and all this other stuff, that they're so clever. But I've gone back and looked, you know, into the history of photography, and it's like, wow, people were doing some really cool things, you know, only a few years after photography was invented, you know. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Slim Aarons. Like I'm a super fan of, I would say, of Slim Aarons. And Tony Vaccaro, he was a World War II photographer turned fashion photographer. He's still alive, but I have a couple of autographs of his books and stuff like that. So Tony Vaccaro and Slim Aarons, like I always go back and I look at them, and the stuff that they captured was a jet set. It was a time where you can never get to, but how he captured it, you know, he didn't sit up there with a studio. He wasn't there with a bunch of makeup artists and just like myself. I'm like, you know what? He's going to go there with a camera. He's going to capture what he can. He's going to do the best he can. And so I look at those things. I look at the lights, look at the cues he did. I mean, some of those photographers back in the 50s and 60s, the work that they produced without any digital things, but just pretty incredible.
Yeah,
pretty incredible.
They had an eye, and they knew how to operate a lens, how to set a lens, which is one of the things that kept me from ever really getting into it, because it was a little too technical for me. Plus, we started doing pinhole photography, and I felt madly in love with that, and I think I'm going to try that again. And I heard you can do digital pinhole, which is kind of cool.
That's different.
Yeah. So, you know, we also have in this area, we really haven't touched on. I've been trying to get John Robson on the show forever. I've known him since before he was born, I like to say, because I knew his parents before he was born. And his dad and my dad were roommates. And but there's so many good photographers that have come out of this area. And one of them, international, is Anthony Barboza, who I'd love to get onto this show as well. But yeah, there are those photographers from the, let's call it old school, that could shoot from the hip. There was one guy that I hired years ago when I had my ad agency, His name was Bruno Lintz, and he was Brazilian.
Uh,
So what's the German guy doing in Brazil?
Yeah.
Don't ask. It was just more like his father because he would have been too young for that. But this guy would shoot, and you never even see him lift his camera up. He would fire on a fly.
That's good. Yeah.
With no lighting or anything, and the blacks. Oh my God, it was so velvety. The grays with just like it were delicious photographs, and he photographed women, especially, because that was his thing. He could take, an average person that he would see in the crowd and shoot her, and she would look like a fashion model. And he said, it's all the light. It's all about the lighting, I've spoken with a couple of, Michael Lapides from the Whaling Museum has started off as a photographer. Now he's a digital manager digital archive manager for the Whaling Museum. But we've spoken about photographers. I guess the knack is knowing that something's going to happen before it happens, because obviously knowing it's going to happen when it happens, unless you've got that camera in your hand and to your eye, seconds count, right?
I think we're fortunate today that we have cell phones that sometimes we can capture stuff, but it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sometimes I'm looking at, like, if I want to get a sunset, I look to see if the day's like humid
Mm-hmm.
and damp, and then it gets still warm at night. So then I know it's still warm at night. It's a little humid. It's probably going to be a sunset. That's going to be a cotton candy, or it's
Mm-hmm.
things that you kind of learn. And there's also things that I kind of learn, like if I'm doing a portrait for somebody this night, and I'm like, I just decided about this weather's not going to work for us, so I've become so different and so in tune with the weather now too, to try to find it. And I have some photos that I've tried to take for 5 years, and then finally this summer, like a couple of weeks ago, I got it. It was just like everything bloomed this year, and it bloomed in a way I haven't seen before. So it just goes to show you that sometimes I don't know, it's all about timing. You have to wait for that perfect moment.
And sometimes those perfect moments come, and if you're not ready for them,
It's the worst.
I'm a painter, and I've always been mesmerized with that. Let's call it the second before something happens, or the second it does happen, or the second immediately following. In fact, there's a Japanese director, I think, he's a really well-known and does serious work, but I guess most people would only know his work for the ramen noodles commercial where the dinosaur stomps on little caveman. But he, in an interview, said something about it's not the frames in motion photography, it's in between the frames that's the most important. How competitive is this marketplace for a photographer?
It's the worst. It's extremely competitive. That's why it's tough to match people who do portraits and do family photographers, because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's why usually when people come out to me and ask me, it's kind of just like a word of mouth. They understand my work. They understand what I can do for them. But that's why I figured, like, well, maybe I could do architecture and real estate, because that's something that really I'm enjoying. So I did that. And then, like, so the portraits and stuff I'll still do, and other things I'll still do, and I'll do commercial work. But I figured if I can really get myself as a commercial and portraiture on the second, and then do like the real estate and architecture, it's a little bit more of a niche than doing what everybody else does. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's very, very competitive, especially the weddings. I mean, now with Instagram, you just look on Instagram, you got like just probably 100 in the area. It's that much.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah, prices still haven't come down, but
yeah, I try to stick to like specific areas. If I'm doing photography now, like 90% of my work's in Paint Aram or South Dartmouth, and people say, well, you got to get outside. I'm like, well, that's okay, but there's gonna be a day when someone needs something and they're gonna come to me. Because
plus because you know the area better than anybody else, and if you always have like a plan B or even probably a plan C. Well, Smith Neck's not going to be working. This isn't going to work, so let's go here.
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
A
And
little
I mean,
bit.
I don't mind that. I mean, it's kind of like a specialty. So there's going to be a one point when someone's going to say, hey, I know that guy that does something, and that's perfect with me because that's a niche. That's something that's going to stand out versus what everybody else is doing.
Right.
So
I just thinking now, I mean, how things have evolved so much, product photography, food, everybody thinks they can shoot food. Food is like jewelry.
yeah,
I guess you could say, and I'm not a photographer, I only know this from hiring and working with photographers. If you can shoot food, you can shoot jewelry, and vice versa. It's all about reflections,
yeah, lighting, yeah,
the lighting, the lack of reflection, let's put it that way.
yeah.
And but yeah, people still think that they can shoot their own food or try to shoot their own handiwork, and it doesn't work.
No, it's tough, and even like the phones nowadays, yeah, they're powerful, but they're not like a DSLR. They're not like the mirrorless. There's nothing that there really isn't. They can only process so much. They're meant to be a phone, and the camera is secondary. But you know, everyone was telling me too that like, oh well, no one's going to have photographers anymore because everybody has a cell phone. Like, well, go print that cell phone photo out for me, and then we'll talk when it's printed out. You'll see. It looks great on a phone. That's all it's meant to be. Is a phone. Just like when you go buy a television at a Best Buy, it looks great in the store because they got it all pumped up to what it should look like,
Yeah, they got it totally calibrated. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's it's different.
Yeah. So best thing you've ever done so far?
This year or just in my life?
Yeah, this year and up until this year.
I would definitely say this year was I would go back to last year. Last year because of COVID and stuff, there wasn't too much business and there wasn't too much going on. So I was able to be myself and just have fun. So what I did was I went back to looking at Impressionism and the painters, and I really learned a lot from them because I was always into painting and I've always loved Impressionism. And I didn't realize how close to Impressionism as we are today in modern times. Because when the Impressionists came around, in like around 1850s, they developed that flat brush. It was never a flat brush; it was always round. So they were able to, capture that one just strike, and it was flat. It wasn't round, and there was a train. People can go travel now and go across the country and go capture something. That's huge. That was never like that before.
And tube paint, that was another big
and to bring all your easel on that's a lot of stuff that they had to bring in and out. So it's different. They want to capture light and they want to capture an impression, and it's kind of just like a modern photographer would do today. So I went back and I studied and I looked at those things and I changed the way I edit, which helped me out a lot. And then I was driving around one day and I remember a place that I used to visit, so I took a picture of a street sign. And then as soon as I took a photo of the street sign, I thought, well, maybe I'll go do more in the area. Maybe these places that people understand and people know, because you never know. People could be searching and they say, oh, I grew up there. And I grew up on that street. So I went around and I took photos of a bunch of street signs and all these other things that just interested me. I wouldn't do normally because I didn't have time. So, and then I went out and I did some other shots that I wouldn't do. But I was able to, last year I found out by mistake that, as I'm going out and taking these photos, some of these photos were blurry, but I still love them. And it just wasn't up to what I wanted it to be, but it was still a nice photo. So I decided that I'll start learning how to digital paint them. So then I started it's almost like a reverse paint. You just add layers on them and then you remove the layers. And then on the layer, you just paint. So you use in Photoshop, you literally paint back in the layers, and you can do it like a watercolor. You can do it like digital, but it made me not get rid of the photo that I liked because it just wasn't sharp. I made it into a painting, which worked out perfectly because it's not supposed to be sharp. So I'd say last year was a year that really turned the corner for me.
It's funny because I was just thinking about Norman Fortier, my cousin. He had a studio in the Village, and he was a world-renowned marine photographer, and then he started doing watercolors. And I'm wondering, I know he was older, but I'm wondering if the technology at some point where he's like, hey, let's see if I can merge these two things together. But
Yeah.
the regardless of the medium, whether it was photography or whether it was watercolor, it was the eye and that sense of composition, which a lot of people still don't quite get.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. You've got people who are totally symmetrical in their head for some weird reason. Everything's got a balance. My stepmother was that way. God bless her. It had to be couch, sofa painting, painting over the sofa, the couch, end table, lamp, coffee table, and then even what was on the coffee table had to be balanced. Chair. Like, and there are other people who just have like a chaotic sense of composition. And then it comes, I think, for some people, completely natural. And then I think culturally, there's a big difference too, because I mean, you talked about the Impressionists. When they started seeing those Japanese woodblock prints that they were using to wrap pottery in, they were like, whoa, because their sense of composition is so totally different.
Yeah, you got to be quick too.
Yeah, because that kind of work. Let's go back to those things, because do you know Carl Simmons?
No.
He's the artist in residence currently at the New Bedford Art Museum. I've been trying to get him on the show forever. A friend of his said he would help me kidnap him and get him into a podcast studio or something. But he's a younger than myself, but he has this incredible sense of history. And there are those little things that you take for granted every single day until they're not there anymore. And then what happens is you wish somebody would have recorded this, because as mundane as it was, it's valuable. Because sometimes the background is the most important element of a photograph when you're doing some sort of research.
The story behind it.
Research, yeah. Where do you want to go from this point? I mean, now that we're coming out of the pandemic, which is historic in more ways than one, because it's changed so many people,
Yeah, it changed me. It changed the way I edit, changed the way I looked at photos. I mean, even before, stupidly, not even realizing I was editing my photos for Instagram when I posted. So I had a photo that was done, but then when I posted it to Instagram, I would change it because it's on a small little surface that you're looking at, and I wanted it to pop more. And I just got the last year, I was like, what am I doing? Kind of just like, it is what it is. Like, and I stopped doing all that stuff, and I just started doing what I wanted to do instead of like what it should. I think people should, what it would look like versus what I want. So, I went back and I studied old photographers. I studied the Impressionisms and all the things that I enjoyed. And I hope from this forward on that I could learn a lot from those things and just keep going forward, because you do learn a lot from those paintings. People don't realize the light that comes through, and people don't realize how tough it was to do. I mean, people weren't doing those things back then. They were inventing it as it was happening, and when you're making your own paint on the site, like colors, like we're so spoiled nowadays, we don't even realize how lucky we have it. It's so important. So I hope just now I can take those cues from the old masters, move forward, take some Slim Aarons and see how we just captured the good life and made it possible that you could see a sneak peek into a world where we didn't know existed, but yet it looks so glamorous. And then just move forward with being always evolving and always the open door, always trying to get better, learning new things. And I hate, if you don't look at YouTube and you don't learn things from YouTube, you're missing out, because it's a whole opportunity out there that teaches you things, and people are on there to help you. It's insane. I taught myself so much just by watching on YouTube. It's a great asset that we have nowadays. So I just want to keep growing, keep going in direction.
Yeah, it's great. That's what my grandson calls it, YouTube University. Yeah,
It's great.
the thing with the Impressionists as well as, and another thing I learned from Mal Oliveira was, like he said, especially painting plein air, people don't realize you have to move like crazy, because it's not like capturing a photograph. Everything is moving. It's not just the clouds that are moving across, but the light starts changing.
Yep.
And if you're not paying attention, you won't notice that. And then when you do pay attention, you realize, oh God, you know, the sky is now totally different in color
Yeah.
from what was on
And the
your.
whole point was to capture that moment. Yeah.
Exactly. Alla prima is what the Italians call it, painting alla prima. No sketches, nothing. You're just slamming paint on, right onto the canvas and doing it that way. And the effects are incredible. And then we've got a guy like Vincent van Gogh, or Van Gogh, as everybody, but now it's cool to say Van Gogh. And but his sense of color, which perplexed a lot of people, and they asked him, "Oh, you don't really see that those colors, do you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do."
Yeah.
So I guess that's something that they've been debating for years, whether he had some thing that where he really did perceive color that way, or his sense of color was so totally different. Some sort of
I forgot one of
reverse color blindness kind of thing.
Yeah, he was an impressionist, and he colored with dots. Do you know that he colored?
Oh, that was George Seurat.
Yeah, Seurat. He colored with these dots, and if you put these dots together, like these different hues, your eye picked up a shadow, and your eye picked up a different color.
Yeah.
But when you go up close to it, so I mean, brilliant.
Oh yeah, they
Insane.
developed offset the concept of color printing, with CMYK or RGB, and yeah, I mean, countless hours of dab, 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 and Sunday in the Park with George, and a majority of his most well-known piece, but the figures were kind of rounded. It's kind of they were the contours were very rounded. There's no other way around it. But don't forget too, at the same time, photography came in around 1849. A lot of the painters thought it was over for them, the academic kind of painters. It was the Impressionists coupled with the Japanese woodblock prints, where their cropping or composition was so totally not traditional. In other words, you didn't have just part of a person hanging off a painting.
Yeah.
Everybody had to be in frame, and these guys didn't. They had a head popping up from the bottom. They had all kinds of things, and it made for some incredibly beautiful work. Whereas the academicians were trying to paint this reality that really just didn't exist at all. Looking into the crystal ball, what do you think the next big thing is going to be
with photography?
Yeah.
I think it's going to an age of being mirrorless and changing. And it's not that I'm not completely mirrorless yet, but I do like a lens because it gives you contour. It gives you, stupid as it is, it gives you like a sense of emotion when you look at the photo. It's not just like a flat image. So, I mean, it's not architecture. When architecture, it's the lines and that's important. But when you're taking a portrait, your eye isn't flat. Your eye bends, so it gives you a little contour around. It gives you a little vignette. You know what I mean? What would see. So I do see a lot. It's going to the mirrorless and stages, but I see it getting bigger and also harder for people to separate themselves because everybody's on Instagram and everybody's doing YouTube and trying to be a creator. Unfortunately, big tech controls who you are, what you see, and stuff. So I think it's just got to be just a little bit more harder than it is now to produce some good things that get noticed, you know? So it's gonna move forward, but it's gonna be harder.
One of the things that's interesting is as advanced as photography has become, one thing that really hasn't changed is the lens. You know, from the earliest, from camera obscura, when they were using it, you know, like with Vermeer and the other painters of his day and age were using that. And even when it transferred over from film to digital, the lenses were still the same.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to see what kind of technology can be created. And then what's amazing is the lenses on the phone are so small.
Yeah. My go-to is a 50 millimeter prime. That's for me, that's my sweet spot. And I like that one. It's small, it's easy, and it captures some pretty great things, you know?
Right. And you don't have to walk
for the 50
around.
millimeter, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
And you don't have to walk around with lenses draped on your neck and everything like that. Yeah. Let's talk about, you know, black and white and color. One of the things that's come up in the last couple of years has been that they're now releasing photographs of World War II that are in color, and people are like, what? And they've always existed in color. It's just that the newspapers weren't able to print them in color, so we only saw them in black and white, and so on and so forth. But there's also this weird psychological thing with black and white and color. I remember doing a layout for a company that had a security issue, and so we set up this fake thing where this organization's being surveilled by like detectives, and the building is going to get raided. And when we did it in color, everybody's like, all we did was just like switch it to black and white, and then showed it as like, oh, now that's a surveillance photo.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of weird. So there's that thing, and then there's the other thing about, there's just something about black and white. Is it, you think, because your brain likes to put things together?
All the pictures of my family and my children in my home are all black and white.
They're all black and white.
All black and white. Black and white is emotion, feeling. It's different. I mean, just like we like warmth of our eyes like warmth, and we don't like really cool. The black and white, it's almost like a calming effect. Like you don't get distracted by what's in the background, or you don't get distracted by you just like pulled into an image because it's monotone. You know, it's black, it's white, that's it. Versus, you know, if you have an image that has a sunset and all this other stuff, and you're going on, you might not notice that person at the bottom of the screen walking. You know, that was intentionally supposed to be there to catch your eye. But then you can go in black and white, and you're like, wow, this subject just pops. You know, I just think even like it gives skin tones a different color. It you know, makes them softer. It makes it more appealing. Like, I think it's great. You know, like even like the old shots of the Kennedys that are in the black and white, and if you shoot it in color, I mean, you're gonna want to see them in black and white. You're not gonna want to see them in color because it's different. It's a different feeling.
Yeah, there's this, I don't know, maybe it's not the right word, but authenticness. There's something that's authentic about black and white, whereas with color, it just seems sometimes fake, or it's a pastiche of something. You know, my dad was a pretty good photographer, and all of the photographs, you know, of me and the family when we go up into Canada every year, they were phenomenally composed. I mean, he had a natural eye, and looking at the, you know, from the time I was born all the way up until when color started to become available to the average Joe, I guess Ektachrome, they were still good, but there's just something about, especially those snapshots, because he was one of the first around here to buy the Polaroid. You know, he made an investment in it to photograph in nightclubs, and but he brought it with him everywhere, and some of those things were just you know, phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then there were some technical things too. The lights. When you're shooting interiors with the Polaroids, they had these light trees that could shrivel your skin. I mean, you could burn yourself on these things.
Yeah.
They were kind of funny. But I've also heard too that a lot of the younger photographers are choosing black and white over color. And another weird thing is there seems to be a demand for darkrooms. People are going back to film, just like they went back to vinyl for records.
I think
what are your thoughts
maybe
on that?
I think digital almost brings it to a level of being too sharp and too perfect, too perfect. And I think maybe the film and even black and white doesn't dumb it down, but it takes it down to a level of it just doesn't have to be like that, like film is not that it's grainy, but film is very soft. It's a soft, it's like a velvety. It's not a pure, you can't zoom in on film, basically. It's on the image, it's there. Whereas you're on your screen on a phone, you can zoom in onto something. It's insane. You can capture so much, but on film, it's just that's it. The details are there where they have to be, and that's it.
Yeah, you can only push so far. That's interesting. So now looking into the future one more time, post-pandemic, there have been 4 artists. There's been some interesting situations, artists who have never been represented by a gallery before, all of a sudden started selling work on the internet, and they didn't even solicit the work. People found them. Artists who had galleries stopped selling because the galleries closed down, so they had no representation. So there's been a lot of crazy shifts going on. And as far as selling work commercially, prints and such, I've seen a lot of photographers printing on aluminum, glass, and canvas, stretch canvas. What are your thoughts on that?
I love it. It's just very expensive. People always are like, oh, well, so-and-so does it for this much. I'm like, okay, I'm not him and I'm not her, but you can do that, certainly. And I'm a business. I file taxes, you know what I mean? Like everybody else, I have to take that into consideration. So when I drop those prices on people, does it look great? Yes. Is it awesome? You don't need a frame. And I guess after you print out your photo and if you do a custom size frame, it could be expensive, but if you just do an 8x10, it's more affordable. But it's beautiful. It's great. It really is. But it's trying to find their customer who's going to appreciate that and understand that it's expensive. It's an expensive medium. We don't just go to a Shutterfly or a CVS. I mean, we use professional labs, and they're not going to drop the prices for us because we have a customer who doesn't want to spend the money, So you have to find the customer who wants to appreciate that. And that really is, it's incredible. I mean, you do get some really good HD images, and it's sleek. You don't need a frame. You still could frame it in a floater. It'll still look great. But the point is, it's ready to hang out of the box.
It's floating on the wall. It's got that
you don't need any problem.
Yep. Well, the other thing too is by the square inch, it may end up even cheaper than having something framed because, for example, when you do a print, whether it's a photographic print or not reproduction, the first thought to most people would be, well, I've got to get it matted. Well, I output mine so that they're output to a standard size frame because I don't like the mats, my preference, but they can do what they want with it afterwards. Long story short, I mean, I'll sell a print, a 16 by 20 print with the images floated with 2 inches on the top, left and right, and then the bottom for me to sign and put I have a stamp that I use. And so they buy that for $150, includes the mail, okay, the shipping. To get a good frame, not something from Target or whatever.
Yeah.
And have it matted and with a museum glass, the whole 9 yards. You're looking at $300 to $600. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yep.
just one painting of mine, a canvas, 24 by 24, is $600 for basically four
Yeah.
pieces of wood.
Yeah.
You know,
It's very expensive.
yeah, yeah,
But if you have the customer that wants to do that, that's great.
yeah.
You know, because then you understand that like they want quality over quantity. You know.
Right, right.
Yeah, I have seen it. It is nice. There's a lab in Germany, Whitewall, that does an excellent job doing that. And so, you know, it all depends on your preference. Some people don't want to go that route. I mean, it's great for businesses. It's great for like people who have big space to fill. If you want to do like a 2x4, you know, because you know, anything under a 2x4, really, I don't think takes advantage of being in an aluminum or under glass. Like if it's big, that's when you take advantage of that, you know.
Yeah,
Other than that, just put it in a frame. You know, I tell people you got to go big to go do that, something like that, because that's the only. It's like a television. You know, you're not going to notice the little thing on your screen, but then when you look at your television, it's like it's a whole different experience, and that's the whole point. You can go up to it, you can look at the detail, you can see
right,
what's going through it.
right. And don't forget, in the showroom, it doesn't have windows,
Yeah,
so you're not gonna be fighting, you know, extraneous light.
yeah.
So that makes
Museum glass is expensive.
yeah, that's another thing, and it has to breathe. And so there's a lot of considerations, and I think basically it's just that the market has to be, the consumer has to be educated on those things.
Yeah,
You know, and you know, people will go out and, oh, is it acid-free paper?
no, never. Is it? Yeah, never. They'll never ask those questions. Oh, is it printed sea clay? No, it's not. They'll never ask that. But yeah, it is. You know,
Yeah,
of course it is.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of nuts. Your children now, since they're pretty much the reason how you really got into this, are they just used to you
Yes.
having a camera all the time?
Yeah.
All right.
Became very easy.
Thankfully.
Thankfully.
Are they just by osmosis, so to speak, picking up a camera, using a cell phone or whatever, and just shooting away? Or
Yeah. Now it's with filters though. They do those like little filters and they do the funny things. You know, they play the games with it. But yeah, my daughter definitely picks up the camera, and then my son's only 2 and he's going through it and he's swiping, and it's
really,
it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
it is kind of interesting to see.
He takes some photos. It's funny.
It is incredible to see these kids. I mean, it's kind of bizarre. They're like kind of trained in the womb or something, because they just take to it so automatically. There's no,
Yes.
you know, ooh, what's that or whatever. They start swiping and.
Yep. Yeah, he's just there. He's like,
Yeah, yeah. If I'm going to wrap this up in a bit, but if you had like a magic wand, and you could only use that magic wand for one wish, and it can only be applied to your career as a photographer, what would you do? What would you wish for?
probably get more exposure. It's tough. Exposure is very tough. You have to really know somebody that knows more people, that knows another person. That's the tough. It's tough. Getting exposure nowadays is very tough, because it's back then people would know who you were if you were a photographer or if you did something. Now it's you just do a little quick search and you got like 50 peoples in a second that could do a job, you know. So exposure is the number one thing. Definitely getting exposure, because once the exposure happens, everything else is pretty easy. So yeah, nowadays it's just the digital age makes it tough to get exposed, because it's just so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about a guy like Dana Smith. He's from this area, and he started off, you know, like a lot of people do. I remember the morning of the Kerr Mill fires. He just happened to be there, because he was doing work for an agency I was working for, and as we were coming into work, we could see the sky on fire. And you know, he did some stringing, I guess, for the Standard Times, and then he ended up going to Yankee Magazine.
Wow.
And I haven't had a chance to get them on the show, but I think a lot of it is the exposure comes through networking, and the networking is a form of community. It's not you just knowing people; it's people knowing of you.
Yes. Yep.
And I think that I always used to say in my classes that birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
So and people like doing business with people they like. So they can't like you unless they know you. So
Yeah.
there's the introductions, there's being in the right place at the right time, so to speak. It's the big break, when you're getting, you got a shot that, I guess these days it could happen on Instagram or Facebook, where it's a shot that just totally blows people away.
I got lucky a couple months back. The magazine hasn't come out yet because who knows when it's, how they work, but I did a shot for Veranda magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty cool. It's a national magazine. So I'm looking forward to see when that comes out. And then, my name's in there. And I've been into like SOCO. I've been into like all these other, other places. I've been featured on many, places, even like just on Instagram, like F.A.O. Schwarz and Pier 1. I actually won a photography contest on Pier 1. I won $1,000 gift card. And so that was pretty cool. I was able to style my house. And so it is exposure's definitely one thing, because if you know someone, like all it takes is that one time. So I'm hoping once maybe this Veranda magazine goes out and it gets published, maybe that exposure shows it to other interior designers, and so it was someone I knew that knew me. So hopefully it's a waiting game, but I'm hopeful that it'll actually see, and maybe I'll get a lead from that. Maybe something will happen, because I'll be in there as a photo credit and stuff for the magazine. So
yeah. Now, I didn't ask you, but is this full time? Is this your job, or is this
no?
Okay.
No. Yeah, that's the incredible thing about it too, because it kind of is a full time job, and it's not. But yes.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of us that we can consider our what people think is a hobby to be our real job, and then the other job is just to pay the bills and put
Yeah. Well, it just took off from taking pictures of my daughter to a lot of other things now, into being a full-time business, and and actually it's just business has picked up. I've had something every week. So since April, since the weather, obviously, but
yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Well, we are definitely going to wrap it up now. Final question. Let's see. If you could be reincarnated as any photographer that's ever existed,
Slim Aarons.
Slim Aarons. You didn't get out of my mouth there, yeah. And because
he lived a good life, and he captured the jet set life. If you actually go look back in his book, he captured history that you can never get back, history that you do not know existed, and he captured it in the best way possible. These people lived a life of being privileged, and it's just he lived a hell of a good life doing those things and seeing what he did. I mean, I could imagine the stuff he saw was pretty crazy too, because back then it wasn't Instagram and people were very private.
Yeah.
But he got to travel all over. He got to see the best of the best, and his networking was one of the best in the world. So I envied what he did, and he lived during the time where, man, it was cool to party,
Yeah. That was definitely a whole other world. That's for sure. All right then. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap this up, and so hold on a second. Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the Artist Index, the Southcoast Artist Index, and sponsored by Heavenly Spirits, importers of fine French spirits primarily. And with that in mind, we hope that you're getting along well, you're enjoying your summer, and remember, be kind to each other out there. Until the next time, thanks and goodbye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the Southcoast Artist Index podcast. The Southcoast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.